Right now on Sunday Square Off, a special report on Donald Trump's connections to Arizona's 2020 partisan election review and how the current criminal cases against the former president could change the way we look at that troubling chapter in state history.
Hi, Mr. Logan. Can you tell us who is paying for this audit?
I'm sorry, sir, but my agreement with the Senate doesn't allow me to talk to the media.
You can't tell the people of Arizona who is paying you to audit their votes. Do I have that right?
I've already given you my answer, sir.
That was Cyber Ninja's CEO Doug Logan in May 2021. The man hired to run the partisan audit of the Maricopa County presidential vote said he had a gag rule in his contract with Republican Senate President Karen Fann. But 2 years later, tens of thousands of documents obtained through the courts reveal what Logan was saying in private to Donald Trump's representatives fighting to overturn his election defeat and pay for the audit. Those documents tell quite a story about Doug Logan and Donald Trump's influence on the audit. The Arizona Republic's court fight to obtain those public documents is another story we're also telling today. I should let you know this happens to be the second anniversary of the partisan audit's final report. The Logan-led chaotic hand count of the Maricopa County vote showed Joe Biden won for a second time. Joining us to share those stories is Arizona Republic investigative reporter Robert Anglin. He teamed up with colleague Ryan Randazzo on the reporting. Ryan now covering national politics. Welcome to Square Off.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So the Republic deserves a lot of credit for pursuing this at considerable expense. It's something you don't see many news organizations doing these days, and want to give them a salute for that. Why did the paper believe this fight for the court for the documents was so important?
Well, let's take out first. This is the only private audit of public ballots in America of the 2020 election. It's significant.
So this was a very big deal. And what was the reason this took so long? As reporters, we file public records requests for documents all the time. What were the roadblocks to getting these documents, not just from Logan, but from the Arizona State Senate, which sponsored the audit?
Well, in short, they refused to turn them over. They flat refused. We had to sue them, which was not undertaken lightly, and it turned into a 2-year court battle that, I might add, is still ongoing today in regard to Doug Logan.
And why did they refuse? What grounds did they stake out in refusing the Senate and Logan to turn over the documents?
Both claimed that they were private, that we had no access to them. In the Senate's case, they argued that it was legislative privilege. In Logan's case, he argued that he didn't have to turn them over because he's a private company, or Cyber Ninjas was a private company, so he had the right to withhold them.
Now, this was interesting because what we had here was the Senate turning over what would have been a legislative function to a private company. Was this kind of a new area of public records law? Do you know?
I don't think it's new, but the fight to get them proved that, in fact, Doug Logan was a public, he was a public figure. He was doing the public's work. Doing the public's bidding at the public's behest, because he was hired by the Arizona Senate, and the courts found that. But it took months and months and months to get it that way, and he's still withholding documents.
And he was also sanctioned along the way.
His company was sanctioned $50,000 a day for refusing to turn over those documents. The total of that is several $1 million. I think it's nearing 20 million if it hasn't surpassed it.
He's been sanctioned $20 million for failing to turn over the documents.
$50,000 a day since, I believe it was January of 2022.
Has he paid a dime of that?
Not to me. Not to anybody.
Not to anybody. Is there anybody who's going to go after him for, well, he doesn't have 20 million, although maybe he can make some calls, I don't know.
The company's defunct. So the chances of someone collecting on that censure is probably next to nil.
Now, it seems like Logan was kind of passive-aggressive in handing over the documents. As you said, you still don't have all of them. But how'd you receive them? What did you get when he finally turned them over?
Oh, it was a complete mess. What he turned over to us was was tens of thousands of, for instance, text messages. They were in no discernible order. Dates were disjointed by batch. There was no chronological order. In fact, so you would get a text that, say, from January 2022, and usually texts are a communication. It's a back and forth. Well, you'd find the back and forth 30, 40 pages away in another single line. They were turned over in PDFs that couldn't initially be searched. It took actually a private team that we enlisted to decipher the data.
So explain that, because that's an important part of the storytelling here. Once you got the public records, you had to make sense of that. Explain how that team helped you put together a coherent narrative, a story of what these text messages, emails, etc. were telling us.
The team it's 3 retired data analysts, election analysts. They're specialists. They're known as the audit guys. And their assistance was absolutely invaluable. What they did was they had to build software to decipher the data, and they did it over several months. And keep in mind, we didn't get the data all at once. We got it in bits and pieces. In fact, there was more data just in the last few days. So we're still getting data. A lot of it was redacted. There are missing messages, thousands of missing messages, thousands of redacted messages. And by missing, I mean you'd have Doug Logan having a conversation with somebody in Trump's inner circle, and then suddenly there wouldn't be a response, and they'd keep talking. They'd pick up the conversation 3 or 4 days later, vaporized.
But you might get that response in another document dump from Doug Logan.
Possibly, although he's still withholding quite a bit of documents.
How many did you get, and how many do you think are still out there?
Tens of thousands, and we know that there's at least 3,500, plus 3,500 redacted, plus additional ones that are missing from conversations altogether.
Is there any rhyme or reason to what you're getting? Or to be sympathetic to him for a moment, is this just hard work at his end to generate all this stuff?
Well, he was a data specialist who was hired to analyze the Arizona's public vote, so I would expect him to be a specialist that could handle some text messages. Apparently, I'm wrong.
Well, fair point, fair point. We're going to move on to our second segment in just a moment and go deeper into the messages. But where is Doug Logan right now?
I imagine he's home in Florida, but his name keeps popping up.
His name keeps popping up. Okay, we're going to get into that in our next segment. Now that we know how you got the documents, we're going to talk about what they show us, the plot, as you've described it, and much more. You can see all of our Sunday Square Off coverage on 12news.com or on our YouTube channel. Go to 12news.com/YouTube.